This week's Parsha is Parshas Tetzave and Parshat Zachor.
Thank you.
And the title of this year, of the little Dvar Torah that we're going to do now in the next few minutes, is called When Not to Be Humble. Okay, and it's based on the Haftorah that we're going to read about the story of King Saul, the tragic King Saul, whose downfall really comes about for a number of reasons, but primarily because of his failure in going to war with Amalek and destroying King Agag and completely annihilating the people of Amalek. And the reason why we read it on Parsha Zachor, the Shabbos before Purim, is because of, as you know, Haman is from Amalek, and this is the thing that the antecedents to the whole story of Purim, because Haman is known as Haman Agagi. Yeah, he's from Agag, and Haman is allowed to come to existence because of King Saul's mistake, his tragic error. So in trying to understand the tragic error, let's take a look at the first few psukim of the Haftorah. It's from Sefer Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tetzaveh, the chapter 15. We'll just look at the first 5 psukim. It says, Vayomer Shmuel al Shaul. By the way, the first pasuk usually we don't learn in the Haftorah. That's different minhagim, but we'll just read it anyway. Vayomer Shmuel al Shaul. Shmuel is given a dispatch to give to Shaul. Osi shalach Hashem l'moshchacho l'melech al amo al Yisrael. It was my duty to anoint you as king over Israel by God. Ve'ata shema l'kol divrei Hashem. And now I want you to listen to the word of God. Now you have a duty to perform as the king of Israel. Kol amar Hashem tzivakos. So says the Lord of hosts. Pakadati es asher asam Amalek liYisrael asher samlo baderech ba'aloso mimitzrayim. It is now time for me to visit upon Amalek the punishment for what they did many generations ago to the Jewish people, when the Jewish people were leaving Egypt and Amalek attacked them. Now's the time for us to finally bring vengeance upon the people of Amalek. What took so long? It's another discussion. Let's go weiter. Atalech, now you, King Saul, go. Vihi kisoes Amalek. I want you to smite Amalek. V'hacharamtem es kol asher lo, and destroy utterly everything that is part of Amalek. V'lo sachmol alav. Do not have any compassion. V'heimata me'ish ad isha. And you have to kill man and woman. Me'olel v'ad yonek, even the suckling infant. Mishor v'ad seh, from an ox to a sheep. Migamal v'ad chamor, from a camel to a donkey. The entire nation and all of their possessions have to be utterly annihilated. And the pasuk then says, Vayishama Shaul es ha'am. So Shaul goes ahead and he announces to the people, Vayifkedeim batilaim masayim elef ragli va'aseres alafim es ish Yehuda, and he bands together, using lots, he pulls together 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 Judeans, people who are going to be fighting in the war. He uses a form of military conscription. Vayavo Shaul ad Yer Amalek vayorev banochal. And Shaul comes to the city of Amalek, and he begins a battle, banochal, in the plain, or in the valley. Nachal can be translated as the plain or the valley. So there's a lot here. It's a tremendous amount here that's here. Very rich information in these few psukim. But we're going to focus on one point, which is the last words, Vayavo Shaul ad Yer Amalek vayorev banochal. That Shaul comes to the city of Amalek and he wages battle in the plain. So comes along the Gemara in Maseches Yoma, Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis. This is source number 2. And it tells us as follows. What is meant by the words Vayorev banochal? That he waged the battle in the plain. Amar Rebbe Mani, al iskei nachal. That when it says that he waged battle in the plain, it means over issues regarding the plain. What does that mean? Bisha'a she'amar lo hakadosh baruch hu l'Shaul, because at that moment when God says to Shaul, Lech v'hikita et Amalek, go and smite Amalek, Amar, Shaul said as follows. He made the following argument. Uma nefesh achat amra Torah have egla arufa. If the Torah says that even for one soul, you have to bring a calf and break its neck, kol hanefashot halalu al achat kama v'kama, then surely for all of these souls that God is asking me to destroy. Now what is Shaul saying? Shaul is making reference to a halacha called the Egla Arufa. The Egla Arufa appears at the end of Parsha Shoftim in the book of Devarim. And it's a special mitzvah. The mitzvah goes as follows. If a corpse is found outside of a city, and you don't know what happened, you don't know how this corpse ended here, we don't know if this was a murder, we don't know what happened, so then it is the responsibility of the elders of the city to assume some level of responsibility for allowing this person to go unescorted out of town and just to be left to his own design. And therefore they have to atone for this crime of that someone died under their watch, and they have to take a calf, bring it to a nachal eitan, bring it to a barren plain, and this is where the word nachal comes into play. Nachal. The plain that Shaul is fighting in is really a reference to the nachal that you're supposed to bring the calf to atone for the death of that one person who was not escorted properly out of the city. And so Shaul says, look, I don't understand. God is so concerned about even one life that is lost under the rabbi's watch, to the point where they have to bring a calf and sacrifice that calf by breaking its neck in this nachal eitan, in this barren plain, as a way of saying that we hereby wish to be atoned for this person's death. And as a matter of fact, the Torah describes in Perek Chaf Aleph in Sefer Devarim what the rabbis are supposed to say. It says, Ve'anu ve'amru. They're supposed to recite as follows: Yadeinu lo shafchu et adam hazeh, ve'eineinu lo ra'u. Our hands did not shed this blood, and our eyes were not witness to this murder. And therefore, kaper le'amacha Yisrael. Therefore, Hashem, please atone for the sin of your people, of this community. And we ask Hashem, v'ni kaper lahem hadam, and the blood will be atoned for them. That's essentially what the formula is for the Egla Arufa. So King Saul says, if God is so concerned about one life, that there has to be an atonement process in the course of one person's life being lost, then if God is now asking me to kill an entire community of people, how much more so will we need to atone for this terrible crime? That was what King Saul was saying. V'im adam chata, behema machate'ah. And furthermore, King Saul says, I can understand human Amalekites sinning, but what did the animals do that was so terrible? And that's why King Saul spared the animals. V'im gedolim chatu, ketanim mechatu. And if the adults are sinful, what did the innocent children do? How can I bear to slaughter the children? Yatsa'a bat kol ve'amralo. So a heavenly voice at that time emerges from heaven and says, Al tihi tzadik harbe. As it says in Koheles, do not be such a big tzaddik. And then, uv'shash amar lo Shaul ledoeg. And then, says the Gemara, by contrast, when King Saul ordered Doeg ha'edomi to utterly wipe out the city of Nov Ir HaKohanim, which was a city of Kohanim that had given refuge, had given sanctuary to King David when he was fleeing from King Saul. And Saul, to avenge the honor of the monarchy, because this city of Nov were parties to an insurrection against the king, and therefore he ordered the city of Nov Ir HaKohanim to be completely slaughtered. He says, Yatsa bat kol ve'amralo, a heavenly voice came out and said at that moment, Al tirsha harbe. As it says in Koheles in the very same breath, do not be so evil. Do not be so righteous, and don't be so evil. Meaning that you got to go in between evil and righteousness. You got to go in the middle. Don't go over so much to the side of righteousness. Don't be so much of a dove, and don't be so much of a hawk, would be another way of saying it. Although we're going to get into politics in a second. Anyway, so I have two questions very quickly that I want to ask. Why is King Saul so concerned? And he makes an analogy to something which at face value seems inappropriate. In the case of the Egla Arufa, we don't know the identity of the murderer. And that's why we have to, as a community, atone. But here we know, God is telling me that I should be the killer of the entire community of Amalek. So what's the analogy? If anything, King Saul should have said, if the Torah is so concerned that it tells me lo tirtzach, and it doesn't want me to kill even a single soul in the world, then surely I shouldn't wipe out an entire community. That would have been the proper kal v'chomer that King Saul should have made. Not a kal v'chomer of atoning for a situation where I'm not the killer, where someone else is a killer, and I just have to atone, where I don't know the identity of the killer. That's question number one. Because the Torah says by killing, motu matarotzeach, that a murderer has to be put to death. That would have been a much more simple and appropriate analogy. And secondly, why does the Gemara connect King Saul's behavior here to his behavior when he ordered the city of Nov, Ir HaKohanim, to be destroyed? If we take a look at Rashi, at the pronouncement of the formulation that I just told you that the elders of the city have to make, Rashi quotes a Gemara in Sota on the words, Yadeinu lo shapchu et adam hazeh. Our hands did not shed this blood, so Rashi says, V'chi alta alev sheziknei beidin shavchei damim hem. This is source number 4. Why did the elders have to say we didn't shed any blood? Would you ever think that the elders of the Beis Din were murderers? So rather, what does it mean? Ella lo ri'inuhu upatarnuhu below mizonot v'lo leviyah. But rather, what is the sin of the Egla Arufa? Why do we have to atone? Is because we have to atone for the fact that maybe, perhaps, we didn't show enough compassion. Perhaps we were apathetic. Perhaps we didn't care about another human being who was visiting among us. And this might have been the ultimate cause of his death. And so King Saul, who was such an unav, he was known as one of the most humble people who ever lived, there's a downside to humility. The downside of humility is if you're constantly soul-searching and saying to yourself, what have I done wrong? Why does the world hate me so much? Why do I have critics? Maybe I have to really look deep and see that I have to uproot the flaws that exist within myself because I'm not such a good person. Maybe that's why I have detractors, and that's why people don't like me, is because I must be a terrible person. And so that's what Shaul was all about. He was saying to himself, let's think about Amalek for a second. Why does Amalek hate us so much? What did we ever do to them? We were a people that was leaving Egypt, and we're minding our own business, and they attacked us. Why does the world hate the Jews so much? Why is there so much anti-Semitism in the world, which is represented by Amalek? Maybe the Jews do bad things, and we provoke people, and we're in your face, and we're overachievers, and maybe there's something wrong with us that we have to atone for. I mean, after all, isn't that what the elders of the city are? They're soul searching, and they're saying to themselves, well, if there's someone who died, and there's blood that's been shed, we must have to take responsibility for it. That's what King Saul was going through his mind. Is that maybe the reason why they hate us so much really does have something to do with us. And after all, isn't that a Jewish trait? To constantly relate to your oppressor and say to him or to her, gee, I wonder why you're sending a flotilla to Gaza after all. Maybe it's because we are being oppressive to the Gazans. And it's got nothing to do with the Egyptians, and it's got nothing to do with Hamas. maybe it's got to do with us. Maybe we're really the bad people. And so let's join you on the flotilla, and we'll participate, and we'll get involved with boycotts and divestments and sanctions as well. Because after all, we as the Jewish people have to do a lot of soul searching for our own crimes. And we won't look at perhaps that there may exist some inherent evil within you. Oh no, the flaw must be within us. That is what Shaul HaMelech is representing here when he makes the analogy to the Eglah Arufa. He's saying to himself, how can it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can point to a nation that is so evil? It's incomprehensible to him because of his own humility that if they hate us so much, there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with Klal Yisrael. And this is the irony, is that what the Gemara is trying to relate when it relates it and compares it or contrasts it to Nov Ir HaKohanim, is that it's the very same flaw that Saul has about his own soul searching to find flaw within himself and with his fellow Jewish people, is that he says, Nov Ir HaKohanim, they're the bad guys. They're the bad ones. And therefore they have to be destroyed. It's because it made him jump to the conclusion that his people are always the first ones to make the mistake. And that's why he jumped the gun and wiped out Nov Ir HaKohanim. Because there's something wrong with Klal Yisrael. We can always do better. And I think that this is part of Shmuel's Tochacha to King Saul. Take a look at Pasuk 5. Later on in the Haftorah, after Saul has failed in his task, and he leaves Agag alive, and he leaves the livestock alive. And Pasuk says, Vayomer Shmuel, Haloim katon ata be'einecha? Do you think that's acceptable for you to be so humble and small in your own eyes? Rosh Yivtei Yisrael ata. You're the head of the Jewish people, the chosen people. Va'im shachacha Hashem lemelech al Yisrael. This is not a time for self-scrutiny and self-doubt. You are the head of the Jewish people, and you have to be confident and strong. And that is your mistake. Your mistake is that when it's time to lead the Jewish people into victory, when it's time to defend the very existence of Klal Yisrael, you cannot afford to soul search and to always scrutinize what's wrong with me and why does the world hate me so much. We have to do what needs to be done in order to protect the present and the future of Klal Yisrael. And those who hate us will hate us because they're Amalek, plain and simple. It is not for us to try and psychoanalyze the rest of the world. That's not our job. And it's also not our job to psychoanalyze ourselves to discover what flaws we possess. When it comes to the future integrity of the Jewish people, we have to be people of action, and we have to have confidence that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a commandment, then it's the right commandment. If he tells us to inherit the land, we inherit the land. If he tells us to be a strong and confident people, then we have to be strong and confident. That's what the mistake of Shaul HaMelech was, and that's what we have to try and counteract when we move forward and we celebrate Purim, which is the downfall and annihilation of all of the, not only of just of Haman and his sons, but of thousands of anti-Semites that were in Persia. It's not the time now for self-analysis and self-flagellation. It's the time for confidence to move forward as a people and to proclaim victory over our enemies. I wish you all a happy Purim.